Music. Allow me to share a few insights on the human ego. It operates as a subtle power lurking right under the veneer of each decision we take, every utterance we voice, and every pause we maintain. We often convince ourselves that we're logical creatures driven by logic and autonomy. Yet, in reality, a great deal of our actions stem from a delicate balance between the vulnerable murmur of our true essence and the external image we perceive of our identity. That balance carries a specific label: the ego. And here's the intriguing aspect. The ego serves as both the facade we don and the reflective surface we gaze upon. It's the narrative we construct about our identity, yet simultaneously, the confinement that prevents us from envisioning our potential evolution. Experts in psychology have explored this concept for generations. Sigmund Freud brought the term decode into widespread use, portraying it as the intermediary between our primal urges and our elevated aspirations. But long prior to Freud, early thinkers grappled with identical inquiries using alternative phrasing. What constitutes my authentic self? Do I merely represent the total of my yearnings, anxieties, and achievements? Or does a more profound element reside below the exterior? Music. Before we proceed, try picturing this scenario. Envision entering a bustling gathering, and in that split second, you sense numerous unseen strings pulling at you. You straighten your posture, you modulate your speech, you chuckle at remarks that wouldn't amuse you in solitude. What's unfolding isn't mere societal conduct. It's your ego enacting a part, and the captivating element is that even without a prepared dialogue, your ego supplies one anyway. It murmurs, "That's quote so one." But now, consider what makes it truly compelling. If the ego plays the performer under the spotlight, then who observes the production? Who occupies the seats in the theater of your existence, silently evaluating each action? That's the endless cycle the ego generates. It positions you as the lead, the reviewer, and the spectators simultaneously. And once you truly observe this dynamic, your self-perception begins to transform. Researchers have uncovered an important finding. The ego extends beyond mere conceit or vanity. Actually, it's predominantly a safeguard. View it as armor. Research in social psychology indicates that the ego functions like a protective barrier, upholding our sense of worth when external pressures risk shattering it. During criticism, setbacks, or feelings of obscurity, the ego intervenes. It twists reality, alters recollections, refines the account until it's tolerable once more. Yet, here's the contradiction. The very mechanism that shields us can also constrain us. For when the ego grows overly dominant, it hinders our development. It insists, la quote tuo. At that juncture, the protective armor that formerly ensured safety evolves into a self-imposed enclosure. Let me pose a question to you. Throughout your experiences, how often have you debated not from genuine conviction, but because admitting error seemed intolerable? How frequently have you clung to a role, a category, a designation, even when it had outgrown its relevance, simply because change felt daunting? That's the ego in action. And if you believe yours is absent, that's merely your ego speaking incognito. Psychology offers a label for this phenomenon: cognitive dissonance. It refers to the unease arising when our convictions clash with our behaviors. The ego's role involves alleviating that tension. Should you regard yourself as truthful, yet utter a falsehood, the ego suggests it wasn't true deception. It was safeguarding another. If you view yourself as diligent but delay tasks for extended periods, the ego reassures you that you thrive amid deadlines. Can you perceive the pattern? The ego prioritizes endurance over accuracy. But here's the revelation. The ego isn't malevolent. It doesn't represent a foe to eradicate. It's an inherent facet of humanity. Indeed, absent it, we'd collapse beneath the burden of societal scrutiny. The issue isn't possessing an ego, but frequently confusing it with our genuine identity. Consider it in these terms. The ego acts as a disguise. However, prolonged wear causes it to conform to our features. We gradually accept the disguise as our true countenance, the tail as fact. And the more tightly we grip that tail, the more challenging it becomes to discern the subtle whisper beneath. the whisper that inquires not. Quote 3. But what is my essence? Now, this is where intrigue intensifies. Contemporary brain science reveals something remarkable. The mind features a default mode network. This system activates during self-reflection, pondering our history, prospects, and public persona. It essentially forms the neural signature of the ego. And the most intriguing detail, this network falls silent in profound meditative states or instances of total immersion. When a creator immerses in artistry, when a performer merges with melody, when you lose awareness amid the splendor of the now. In those uncommon instances, the sense of self eases its hold. The facade fades, and for just an instant, you're merely present, raw, exposed, liberated. Yet here's the twist. Even in its quiet phases, the ego creeps back in. You sit in meditation only for thoughts to murmur, E.T. Quote at E4. That's the ego slipping through the side entrance. It's like the ego refuses to remain unnoticed. It feeds on focus, including the focus aimed at releasing it. Allow me to share a tale. A monk once devoted years to quietude, intent on subduing his ego. One day, a fellow monk inquired, quote, "Mavai 5?" He responded, quote, "Naka 6." In that instant, he grasped that his silence had evolved into a more amplified version of ego. Such is the contradiction. The ego clings to everything, including modesty itself. So what does this imply for us? If the ego serves as both our armor and our cage, how do we coexist with it? That's the core inquiry. And this is where I'd like to leave a thread open. From exploring psychology and philosophy, I learned that the ego isn't an adversary to defeat. It's a companion to embrace. Befriending it reshapes our entire existence. But before delving deeper, let's halt for a moment. Recall the most recent occasion when someone wounded your emotions, even slightly. Perhaps they overlooked your text, or challenged you publicly, or withheld the acknowledgement you felt entitled to. Can you sense that sensation? The constriction in your torso, the inner dialogue insisting, "Don't they recognize my value?" That's the ego at its most regal. And our collective experience of it reveals a key insight. The ego unites us all. It's no defect. It's the common essence of humanity. And there's a subtle wonder in this. If we train ourselves to observe the ego without judgment, spotting it mid-action, its dominance starts to wane. Insight acts like daylight. Once we direct it toward the ego, shadows begin to lift. Underneath emerges something gentler, more genuine, the essence that requires no disguises to endure. But what form does that essence take? How do we access it amid daily routines? I assure you, true change resides there, potentially altering your self-perception permanently. Reality is, the ego won't vanish entirely. Those claiming to have eradicated theirs are merely dwelling in a fresh ego narrative. Yet we can alter our dynamic with it. Rather than allowing it to steer, we can position it beside us. Instead of viewing it as foe, we can acknowledge it as the frightened inner child, forever striving to shield us. Consider this. Whenever your ego surges, it's often guarding something vital. Your value, your sense of who you are, your place in the world. The ego resembles a sentinel convinced the world is crueler than it truly is. Thus, it erects barriers. But barriers have a downside. They block threats but also vitality. Contemporary psychology offers a profound lesson. Self-determination theory demonstrates that people flourish when core needs are fulfilled: independence, capability, and relatedness. When these seem endangered, the ego surges forth. Workplace critique undermines your capability. Rejection endangers your bonds. Feeling manipulated assaults your independence. Hence, the ego intervenes to safeguard. But imagine responding with a brief stop and reflection. What is my ego shielding at this moment? Which need appears vulnerable? This subtle pivot from impulse to observation unlocks profound possibilities. Here's an illustration. Picture a discussion where another person cuts you off. Immediately, tension grips your body. You sense erasure, obscurity. The ego urges retaliation to reclaim territory. Yet if you hesitate, if you inhale deeply, clarity might arise. My desire for esteem is at stake. My ego seeks to protect me. Now, choice emerges. You could retaliate sharply or respond steadily, assertively from a space transcending the ego. The exchange shifts not through ego's absence, but via your discernment of it. This habit of discerning the ego isn't merely mental, it's profoundly sacred. Ancient teachings worldwide echo this wisdom. Liberation dawns when we perceive we're not the chatter in our minds, we're the observer beyond it. The ego demands, guard yourself, validate your worth, dominate all. But the truer essence murmurs, you suffice as you are. As we attune to that subtler call, we shift toward genuine living over dread. Yet the contradiction persists. The ego doesn't just breed pain, it also ignites motivation. Many masterpieces of creativity, daring innovations, profound aspirations, all sprang from ego's spark. The artist yearning for legacy, the researcher hungry for acclaim, a visionary leader eager for their ideas to resonate. Remove those drives, and maybe none of these innovations would ever see the light of day. The aim isn't to banish the ego entirely, but to weave it into our lives, allowing it to support us without dominating us. Picture the ego like a flame. Tended in a hearth, it brings comfort to the space. Left unchecked, it engulfs everything in ruin. The trick lies not in dreading the blaze, but in mastering how to contain it safely. What captivates me most is this. Research into meditation and mindfulness reveals that those who cultivate presence forge a transformed bond with the ego. They don't achieve total egolessness. Rather, they detach from the ego's ups and downs. Praise rolls off without attachment. Criticism fails to shatter them. Their core identity roots in something more profound than validation or dismissal. Perhaps that's the core insight, grounding yourself not in the ego's narrative, but in the vast sea of consciousness below it. Yet, how do we bridge that gap amid everyday routines, far from meditation mats or abstract texts? The path could be more straightforward than it seems. It starts with subtle observations. Catch the instant when the impulse to validate yourself arises. Feel the pinch of being ignored. Sense the rush of vanity from a compliment. These instances reveal the ego in action, and each offers a chance to greet it with a soft grin instead of getting swept away. I adore this analogy. Envision the ego as a performer glued to the center of the stage, unwilling to yield. Push against it, and it resists with greater force. But offer a nod, recognize its role, and permit the scene to unfold. The performer eases up. Gradually, it might retreat, making room for fresh qualities to appear: empathy, modesty, ingenuity, and affection. And the elegant reversal? As the ego eases its grip, we forge stronger ties with those around us. How come? The ego fixates on division. It pits Patriarch's quote 11 against quote 12 Hadars, my value versus yours. Yet when it yields, we spot our reflections in others. We grasp that every ego shields the identical vulnerable longing to feel noticed, appreciated, and secure. In that instant, former rivals turn into reflections of our shared essence. Such awareness shifts the entire landscape. Picture a society where, rather than countering one another's egos with our own defenses, we reply with empathy. The frustrated motorist, the arrogant coworker, the judgmental guardian, all merely egos guarding a delicate core. If we perceived that truth sharply, wouldn't our interactions soften immeasurably? But one puzzle persists. If we're not defined by the ego, then what defines us? That's the enigma woven into our very being. Some claim we're pure awareness, the quiet observer amid the turmoil. Others insist we're essence of connection, free from barriers. Many argue the query defies language, demanding to be experienced. Regardless of the reality, this holds true. The further we observe the ego without letting it overwhelm us, the nearer we draw to that profound truth. Thus comes the ironic boon. Though the ego frequently obscures our view, it also opens the path to enlightenment. Each surge of arrogance, each twinge of doubt, each frantic bid for affirmation serves as a beacon, a urgent glow urging, like quote 13. A greater depth lurks just below. If we pursue those cues with wonder rather than blame, the ego shifts from foe to guide. To wrap up, consider this reflection. Someday, glancing back on your journey, you won't dwell on awards or accolades, not the cheers or endorsements. Instead, you'll cherish the hushed instances, the shared chuckle with a companion, the steady clasp of a hand, the courage to reveal your unguarded self. In those times, the ego fell quiet, without lines to recite, and precisely those will glow most vividly. Maybe the wisdom boils down to this: not demolishing the ego, but coexisting with it kindly. Heed its murmurs, express gratitude for its safeguards, yet gently assert, you're not in charge. You're just one note in the harmony. And under that note lies a symphony of far richer depth, yearning to resound. If nothing more lingers from these words, hold on to this. You're not the tale the ego spins. You're the presence attuned to the tale. And that presence, unmarred, enduring, boundless, that's your true essence. Music,